If you've ever turned a doorknob carefully so it wouldn't make a sound. If you've opened a microwave door 1 second before it beeps. If making yourself quiet and small feels like second nature, there's a psychological reason. And it goes back further than you think, to a time when being noticed felt unsafe. If that felt familiar, do two things right now. Hit the like button. It tells me this matters. And subscribe, because there's more here that explains the patterns you thought were just you. What you just recognized is linked to something psychologists call childhood emotional neglect, not abuse, not poverty, not a broken home. It exists in families that looked completely normal. Bills paid, meals made, birthdays remembered. But emotional presence was quietly absent. The parent who noticed what you were feeling, not just what you needed, wasn't consistently there. And that absence shaped your nervous system in ways that are still showing up today. The habits we're about to explore don't feel like trauma responses, they feel like personality. But psychology sees something different. These are nervous system adaptations to an environment that couldn't hold your emotional needs. Understanding what they actually are is the first step to putting them down. Habit 1: Physical silence. The first habit is one most people never think to mention. You turn doorknobs before you close doors so they don't click. You open the microwave 1 second before the beep. You make sure you move through life as quietly as possible. Thousands of people will recognize themselves immediately. Real moment. It's late evening. You're home alone. You heat something in the microwave. The timer counts down 03, 02, 01. Your hand is already on the door handle. You open it before the beep. Silence. You walk to your bedroom, close the door behind you. But your hand doesn't just push it shut. It turns the knob, holds it turned, guides the door closed, releases only after it's fully settled. Not a sound. You do this every time. In your own home, when no one's there to hear, when it doesn't matter, but you still do it. From the outside, this looks like politeness. From the inside, it's a survival adaptation. Research in developmental psychology shows that children in emotionally unpredictable environments develop what's called hypervigilant motor control, the unconscious regulation of physical presence to minimize negative attention. When a child's presence consistently triggered irritation or anger, their nervous system learned the safest way to exist is to not be noticed. So you learned to control the sounds your body makes, to move lightly, to shrink physically. This isn't courtesy, it's a nervous system that still believes being heard means being a problem. Habit 2: Apologizing constantly. The second habit happens before you even think about it. Someone realized you've been apologizing for existing your whole life. You didn't even notice until one day it hit you. Hundreds saw themselves in those words. Real moment: you're walking down a hallway, someone's coming from the opposite direction, looking at their phone, they bump into you. And before you even register what happened, the word is out. Sorry. You apologized. For being bumped into, this happens constantly. At work, in the grocery store, at home, sorry, sorry, sorry. For things that aren't your fault, for things that aren't even problems, for simply being there. Psychologically, this is called preemptive self minimization. When a child's emotional expressions are consistently met with dismissal or irritation, they don't conclude the adults are failing. They conclude, I am too much. And that belief becomes automatic. You say sorry before finishing sentences. Sorry for asking, sorry for needing, sorry for taking up space. This happens before you've assessed whether an apology is actually necessary. The apology isn't weakness, it's the adult expression of a child who learned that existing visibly came with risk. You're not apologizing to the person in front of you, you're apologizing to a memory. Habit 3: Can't ask for help. The third habit runs deeper than most realize. Help always came with strings attached to other. You became self-sufficient because asking meant you'd owe something later. Over most of you will understood exactly what that meant. Real scenario: you're 10 years old, You ask for help with something you genuinely can't do alone. Your parent helps. 3 days later, during an argument about something completely unrelated, you hear, after I helped you with that thing, and this is how you act. You're 14. You need a ride somewhere. They say, yes. But for the next 2 weeks, every small request is met with, I just drove you last Saturday, didn't I? You're 25 now. You struggle with something for hours, maybe days, before even considering asking anyone. Not because you don't need help, but because you learned very early help isn't free. It comes with a bill you'll be reminded of later. So you stopped asking. Studies on attachment show that children who repeatedly reach for comfort and find absence, or find help that's later weaponized, develop what researchers call counterdependency, a defensive self reliance that protects against the pain of unmet needs. You will exhaust every option before saying, I need help. And even when you do, something in you stays braced, waiting for the response to confirm what you already expect, that your need is an inconvenience. This isn't strength, it's a fortress. And inside that fortress, you're fundamentally alone. Not because you don't want support, but because your nervous system still believes that needing people is a risk you can't afford. Habit 4. Don't know what you're feeling. The fourth habit is one of the quietest. When people ask how you feel, your mind goes blank. You genuinely don't know. You just say fine or tired. Many people recognized that exact experience. Real moment, someone asks, how are you feeling about that? And your mind goes blank. Not because you're hiding something. You genuinely don't know. You fumble for words. Fine, tired. Okay, I guess. Words that gesture towards something without landing anywhere specific. Later, alone, you realize, I should have known what I was feeling, but you didn't, and you still don't. This isn't emotional unavailability. It's the result of growing up where emotions were not named, not explored, not responded to. Neuroscience research shows that emotional literacy, the ability to identify and name feelings, develops through a process called affect labeling, where caregivers name a child's emotions for them. You look sad. Do you want to talk? That sounds frustrating. When that mirroring never happens, the child doesn't develop the internal map to navigate their emotional landscape. You grow into an adult who feels deeply but describes emotions in physical terms: tired, heavy, off, because the emotional vocabulary was never built. This isn't a weakness, it's a gap where teaching should have been. Habit 5. Easy child. Praise. The fifth habit isn't a behavior, it's a label. The easy child grows into an adult who can't ask for help without guilt. You are always praised for being so mature, so independent. Hundreds recognized that painful pattern. Real moment. You're at a family gathering. An aunt says to someone else, gesturing at you, they were always such an easy kid, never gave us any trouble, so mature for their age. Everyone smiles. You smile too. But something twists inside because you remember being 8, 9, 10 years old. And you remember learning very quickly that when you asked for things, people seemed tired. When you cried, people seemed annoyed. When you needed attention, people seemed busy. So you stopped asking, stopped crying, stopped needing. And they called you mature, they called you easy. But you weren't mature. You were adapting to an environment that couldn't hold you. Developmental psychology identifies this as premature self sufficiency. When a child learns too early to suppress normal needs because the environment can't hold them. Children are supposed to need things, to ask questions, to require attention. When a child becomes easy too early, it means they've adapted to an environment that couldn't handle their healthy needs. So they learned to have fewer needs, or at least to show fewer. What adults praised as maturity was actually a child coping with emotional neglect. If you were the easy child, this isn't something to be proud of. This is something to grieve. Because you deserve to take up space. Habit 6. Over explaining. The sixth habit shows up in almost every conversation. You give a 3-minute explanation for being 5 minutes late. You justify every choice even when no one's asking. Many people saw themselves immediately. Real moment. You're 5 minutes late to a meeting. You sit down and immediately launch into a detailed explanation. Traffic, the route you took, why you left when you did, what delayed you. No one asked. No one cares. But you can't stop yourself from building the case, making sure your lateness is fully justified, logically airtight. When a child's preferences and needs weren't inherently respected, they learn that wanting something requires justification. You're not explaining yourself to the person in front of you. You're explaining yourself to what psychologists call an internalized critical observer, a voice from childhood that never gave you permission to simply be. You learn to pre-defend every choice before anyone could question it. And decades later, you're still running that defense, even when no one's questioning you. The internal courtroom is still in session, and you're still proving you had the right to exist. Deep breath. If you're recognizing yourself in these habits, I want to be clear about something. There is nothing wrong with you. Pause. There never was. Your brain adapted to an environment that asked too much from a child. These habits were survival tools, and they worked. They got you here. But they were built for a world that no longer exists. And understanding where they came from is the first step to putting them down. Habit 7. Emotional hyper responsibility. The seventh habit is exhausting. When someone's upset, you feel it in your body before your mind processes it. You're already managing it before anyone asks. Real scenario. You're in a pizza restaurant. Groups of friends laugh and talk around you at other tables. You're at a separate table, eating alone. Not because you want to be alone, but because even in this crowded room, you feel completely disconnected. You're not tasting your pizza, you're scanning. That person's smile just faded. Did something happen? That friend's voice sounds tense, even through laughter. You notice the shift before anyone else does. You're not present with your meal, you're managing the room. Reading micro expressions, sensing emotional undercurrents. And the exhausting part? No one asked you to do this. No one knows you're doing it. But you can't stop. Because your nervous system learned long ago your safety depended on knowing everyone's emotional state. So even here, in this warm, lively place, you can't relax. You're physically present but emotionally elsewhere. Alone in a crowd, not because you're excluded, but because you're too busy managing everyone else's emotions to connect with your own. This is emotional hyperresponsibility. Research links it to childhood environments where adults' emotions were large, unpredictable, and unmanaged. When a parent's mood determined the safety of the entire environment, you learned that monitoring others' emotional states was how you stayed safe. You became exquisitely attuned to other people's feelings and almost completely untrained in attending to your own. Some call this empathy. But some of it is a child who learned that others' emotions were more important and more dangerous than their own. If you scan every room for who's upset, this nervous system is still protecting you from a danger that no longer exists. Habit 8. Service based worth. The eighth habit creates a pattern most don't see until it's pointed out. You're everyone's support, but when you're in crisis, you disappear. You don't call anyone. This resonated deeply with many. Real moment, you're the one people call when they need something. The friend who listens at 2 a.m., the coworker who stays late to help, the family member who shows up, no questions asked. But when you're struggling, really struggling, you don't call anyone. You handle it alone, quietly. And when people say, "Why didn't you tell me? I would have helped," you don't have an answer. Because asking for help doesn't even feel like an option. Somewhere in childhood, you discovered that the only way to receive positive attention was to be useful. Psychologists call this the service based worth trap, justifying your existence through what you do for others, not who you are. You learned that being helpful produced warmth, while being needy produced withdrawal. This creates a life that looks like generosity and feels like a debt you can never stop paying because receiving care doesn't feel like love. It feels like a trap. You're not strong by choice. You're strong because needing people never felt safe. Habit 9, your body keeps the score. The ninth habit isn't just psychological, it's physical. You wake up tense every day. Doctors find nothing wrong, but your body won't relax. Many finally understood why. Real moment, you wake up tense, shoulders tight, jaw clenched. You didn't have a nightmare. Nothing bad happened yesterday, but your body feels like it's bracing for something. You've been to doctors, they run tests, everything comes back normal. Stress, they say. Try to relax. But you don't know how to relax because your body learned decades ago to stay on alert. Childhood emotional neglect doesn't just shape your mind, it shapes your nervous system. Research in trauma psychology shows that chronic childhood stress creates autonomic dysregulation. The body stays in a low level state of fight or flight even when the environment is safe. The emotions you couldn't express didn't disappear, they got stored. In your shoulders, your stomach, the tightness in your chest, what you couldn't say as a child, your body is still holding. And until you address the emotional neglect that shaped it, the body will keep trying to tell you what the mind learned to ignore. Your body isn't broken, it's still in survival mode, waiting for the signal that it's finally safe. Healing doesn't start with transformation, it starts with small permissions. Permission 1. The next time you apologize, pause. Ask if it's needed. If not, don't say it. Permission 2. Rest without earning it once this week. Let the guilt rise and stay anyway. Permission 3. Let someone help with something small. Your nervous system needs evidence that needing people is survivable. These are small, repeated moments of choosing differently. This is how the nervous system learns the old rules no longer apply. Every habit on this list was intelligent. None of it was dysfunction, it was adaptation. The problem is the environment that required them no longer exists. And whether you're 25 or 75, recognizing these patterns now is the beginning of something. You adapted beautifully to something that shouldn't have happened. The things you do that feel like personality are actually old survival strategies. And survival strategies, once you see them clearly, can finally begin to change. Out of these 9 patterns, which one felt most personal to you? Tell me in the comments. Because the moment you can name what's been running quietly inside you for years, that's when it starts to lose its grip. If you recognize yourself in these patterns, you're not alone, and you're not ordinary in how you process pain. Subscribe if you want to understand why you're built differently.